Welcome back, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed the sessions earlier today. This is our final one today, and it is West Yorkshire Trauma Informed 2030. And we have Warren, and Rob. And we've got some questions already that people have sent in. And if anybody would like to send any questions live, please use the Slido and we can ask those questions during this session. So our first question is specifically to Rob. So in your presentation yesterday, you talked about a shift in the trauma-informed movement. As one of the pioneers of trauma-informed systems in West Yorkshire, could you tell us why you feel this is happening now?
Yeah, it's a very long answer, but I'll keep it quickly because I know we haven't got 3 days. It's a shift in society. I think what you're doing is just one element of a bigger process that's happening everywhere. Yeah. And I think it's being driven by processes that we're yet to truly understand in our culture. And I think those processes, if you're an anthropologist, you could probably explain it better than I, but I think this is a massive shift for lots of reasons. And you're just one very important part of it. You know, public health will be the glue, I believe, to hold together lots of things.
Thank you. So a general question for everybody. So obviously the subject of this is West Yorkshire Trauma Informed 2030. So what does it mean to be trauma informed by 2030?
I suppose I should go first, I guess, as sort of the person that's been sticking around with this programme for the longest.
Leading the programme.
I lead with 500 other people across West Yorkshire. So why is it important? It's important because, what I said in the previous panel, we want to be a system where people feel that they're welcome, that they feel safe, that they belong. We want to prevent people from having to suffer, from having to feel harm, injury in any way, shape or form. And we want to create a society and a culture of compassion, relationships, and it's the right thing to do. As Lisa said earlier, it is the right thing to do. So that's why it's important.
Thank you. Do anybody else want to?
Run me the question again, Carla.
What does it mean, and how important is it to be trauma informed?
I don't know if I've got short-term memory problems or attention problems, one or the other. I think when we first met, we talked a lot about what does the global evidence in public health say. I think Bob's right. It's a public health mission. And we looked at the global evidence and it said, well, you could transform health in a generation if you had cross-sector collaboration that was long-term, that had a single goal, where everybody worked together and you invest in prevention, you look after the workforce, you find out what's happened to people sooner so they can get the help they need sooner, rather than waiting for 25 years until they're eventually able to disclose to somebody after numerous attempts at trying. So that's one of the things we can do. Also, investing in child and family well-being. So if we help parents when they've got babies and toddlers, there's a huge return on investment by doing that kind of work. The early years work is massively rewarding, both in human terms but also economic terms. And then we also have to get better at working on this resilience and health-giving agenda as well. So a lot of what we're doing, a lot of what we're struggling with, and you see it in the news every day, is the massive burden on the health service and on social care, not being able to meet the demand. We talked about it earlier. But actually, one of the things all these global public health bodies agree on is that we should and we can get better at promoting health and building resilience. For example, in California, they're doing this program of routine inquiry about adversity. So if you go to a GP or a paediatrician, you'll be asked about if you've experienced any adversity, or you'll be given the choice. If you want to talk about it, you fill the form and you talk to the GP or the nurse, and they then give you a whole range, a whole menu of public health interventions. So they then teach you about stress, about recovery from trauma, and about resilience. So they talk to you about mental health and well-being, what you can do for that, nutrition, sleep, physical exercise, they can help you manage stress and reduce inflammation in your body. They obviously talk to people about mental health and what options there are. And we talked earlier about improving access to mental health services would be a good thing. And they also talk to people about things like social support and how powerful relationships and social belonging can be. We talked about that again. And finally, they teach people practical techniques like mindfulness. So all of these public health bodies agree if we can identify it sooner, give people help sooner, move upstream, focus on preventative things like family, early years family support, health visiting, family nurse partnership, parenting courses, youth work, mentoring, all those kinds of things, then you're going to see a big return on investment. And ultimately, we talked about parity of esteem earlier in terms of parity of esteem between physical health and mental health. I think we also need a parity of esteem between restorative practices, picking up pieces, helping people stay healthy, once they've had a problem, helping them recover, but also about helping people stay well.
Yeah.
So we've got these people who are trying to recover because they've been affected already. There's lots of people like that. Yeah. We've also got people who maybe we can help them by, what's the word? I think enabling them to live healthy, not stress-free lives because we're all affected by stress, but manage stress better.
Yeah. And what's really important in West Yorkshire is this isn't just about adversity and trauma that's felt in and experienced in childhood. This is a life course approach. Yeah. So this is to support people at any point in their journey to prevent harm and to mitigate harm, but also for people that may find themselves in vulnerable situations, people that might be involved with the criminal justice system. There's often a reason why people are in those vulnerable positions. And actually, it doesn't mean to say that they're a write-off. It doesn't mean to say that we cast them out. You've been to prison, that's it. Actually, what we want to do in West Yorkshire is understand what's happened to those people and help them realise that they can have opportunities. They can have a different life if they want it. And some of that's been evidenced in the work that we've been doing in H&P Leeds and with the men in the prison there. And it's just been amazing, just the conversations that we have and seeing the shift in where they started their journey and where they think they could go now. Some of them are even talking about starting their own businesses and helping other people that have been in their situation. And if we hadn't have gone and had those conversations, if nobody had those conversations with them, they wouldn't have known, because you don't know what you don't know. And as you said, Warren, in the last panel, once you hear this stuff, you can't unhear it.
And we had one of our champions in the prison was saying the knowledge that he learned from the groups, the time we spent with people. He's having different conversations with his kids.
Yeah.
And he's making interventions with his children on the basis of not having his experience and his situation, and his child's situation affect his life chances. And he's very moving when he talks about that. So. And I think that's an idea as well, optimism for recovery, that idea that everybody should and can have a healthy life in West Yorkshire. I think that.
And should have the opportunity for that.
Yeah.
And the equity that needs to be resolved in order to enable that to happen.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to be a bit radical.
No.
And actually kind of say something that I think is really important now. I think systems that have been designed for categorization, transferring into a world where categorization won't be as simple, simply because what Dr. Bloom said, which is a living ecosystem of human experiential involvement in a society. That's not a categorization, that's a constant evolving conversation between the individual and the culture in which they're in. Yeah. And I think people in the system in the NHS, so I'll talk about the NHS or social, in the wider system of human services, we need to kind of relax a bit. What you've just described is actually the best categorization you can think of, is what you bring to those men in prison. It's not the PhD. I mean, I help to supervise clinical psychology students, very bright, very clever, and people in public health, very bright, very clever. But what you're bringing, if you're successful, is you. Is human.
It is.
What the people in prison are looking for is somebody who can sit with them and be human and bring the box of skills and experience and knowledge with you, but not to impose it on them, to allow them access to it. And I think that's the best category, is Bloom's vision. I call it ecological theory, she calls it living theory, but that living organism theory, I think that's the gateway, and it frees everybody. It frees the people who are traumatised, and it frees the workers to be what history anthropologists will tell you is the most important aspect of safety in any culture, any size, is the freedom to be yourself and to be heard.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and that links back to what Lisa was saying earlier about belonging, because if you feel like you can be yourself, then you feel like you belong.
And importantly, to add to that, I've been to a seminar recently by someone I'd forgotten about from my undergraduate days, who's a critical psychologist, so scare everybody. But he's actually really bright. And what he's talking about is social justice. And he's talking about social, and so is Judith Herman, who is, one of the most seminal thinkers in trauma. And what the word they're using is mattering.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have to tell those young children who are doing county lines, not that they're vulnerable, not that they matter to us. We know it's tough. You matter to us, and that mattering is a doorway to
or at least they matter to somebody.
You matter.
Yeah, because I think, we've got lots of children and young people in West Yorkshire now that probably feel they don't matter to anybody.
Yeah.
And if we can give them that, if any one professional or non-professional community member can give somebody that opportunity to feel like they're cared for and they matter, that in itself is a gift, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that, the resilience research is totally in agreement with that. Belonging and feeling a part of something.
Yeah.
And then you look at the seminal research of Bowlby and people like that who talks about attachment in terms of and attachment and adolescence. Adolescence is this thing that lasts a really long time, till like you're 26, 28 maybe, in brain science terms. And during that whole period, one of our fundamental needs is to be in a safe relationship with somebody, an adult figure, a safe mentor or role model, somebody we can look up to. And I think it isn't a surprise that people do become vulnerable if they haven't got that. And if you see, if you feel like you've got no safety, you feel vulnerable, you don't think anyone cares about you, you've got no status, no one listens. I can imagine that joining a gang or being a part of something like that would probably be meeting some of my needs. So we have to make sure that, like you're saying, kids feel like they matter, feel like they belong. Therefore, there's not this huge void of attachment in their lives while they're going through adolescence, which is when they need safe adults.
And if you think about that and you think about what Rob's just said around categorising, we categorise people across the life course as well. So we get categorised by so many different ways, don't we? We were saying earlier, weren't we? Gender, race, age.
Mental health levels.
Exactly. And actually, we categorise adolescents from the age of 13, because you turn into a teenager, to the age of 18, and then 19 you're an adult, or 18 you're even an adult. You can vote, you can be independent of your parents, of any other sort of system, I suppose. But biologically, adolescence has not finished. So we're actually expecting unrealistic expectations of people in that 18 to 25, 26 age range. And in West Yorkshire, we know that is the most underserved part of our population in age, because they fall off a cliff and there isn't anybody to pick them back up. So actually another reason why we do this across the life course is to make sure that transition period from childhood, adolescent to adulthood can be really traumatic, and that we embed that in the work that we do. So we've obviously got the network at the moment that anybody can come to that tends to sort of focus on the 18 down years from preconception, but we will be re-establishing the adult network very shortly, which is the legacy of the West Yorkshire Finding Independence work. And we'll be re-establishing that because we need to look at that transition and that transition stage. And we almost need to redefine adolescence. Because if we go back to our conversation about NHS services, you think about you're in children's services, you are seen as a whole person, and generally seen as with a multidisciplinary team. Your parents are welcome, everything, and almost wrapped in cotton wool, and that's lovely, and it's great. And at 16, you're thrown into adult services, and that's not there anymore, and that's when you become a walking organ. And West Yorkshire's done massive work over transition, because I was part of it a few years ago with the clinical networks, and so I know there's some amazing work both in health and outside of health, but it's really important it's embedded in this programme, that transition period isn't forgotten about.
Yeah, definitely, and that's something we're looking at in the justice system work,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
About people, you know, young people going from a prison and all of a sudden they hit 16 and then they're expected to go into an adult prison where it's a
And young people in care.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's completely different. Well, they're
Yeah.
expected to go live alone then, aren't they?
Yeah.
And, you've actually answered my next question because that was going to be how we're doing this. So that's sort of answered that one. And so one of the next questions is, how do we envisage organisations sustaining being trauma-informed?
That's the embedding the culture change.
Yeah.
It's what we're aspiring to, the ambition. So the ambition for West Yorkshire is to be trauma-informed and responsive by 2030. In the nature of that ambition, what we're saying is we're not now. There's parts that are fantastic, and Rob's been doing this a long time in West Yorkshire. In fact, one of the reasons why this programme exists. And so, you know, we know that this has been happening for a long time, but we're not there. And that's why we want to go on this journey. And this journey is about embedding that culture change. It's about ensuring that everybody across West Yorkshire, everybody that lives, works, breathes in West Yorkshire, sees this as their business and puts that trauma-informed pair of glasses on whenever they're doing anything, be it working with people, be it speaking to their neighbour, they put that trauma-informed pair of glasses on. And we'll get there when we don't take it off.
Yeah.
And that won't be at 2030. At 2030, we'll have to work towards keeping the glasses on.
Yeah. And how we're going to go engage with sort of private organisations, private companies, how are we, and that's going to be a sort of difficult process, maybe.
I think I'm starting to see, like I deliver a lot of training to groups of people, mixed groups of people, and I'm starting to see more and more what I call the random members of the group, which like normally you expect to see the social workers, the nurses, the probation officers, but then you occasionally see a chef or a logistics worker or somebody who works in hospitality, and you go, oh, okay, so the wider world are starting to hear about this. But just coming back to this point about sustainability, I think we've got to get the essential ingredients right, as Rob and Em have said. We've got to get those fundamentals right. So everybody needs to know what this is about, have an opinion on it. Organisations need to be able to measure their progress. So we're looking at that in terms of knowledge and skills and quality standards and all of those things. So having a way of assessing how you're doing, making it concrete. I also think there's something about the another fundamental, which is that reflective practice for the workforce, making sure people have access to that supervision, whether it's professional, clinical, group, whatever kind of supervision it is, but some opportunity to restore, unburden and reflect. That's got to be a part of sustaining this practice. And I think the other thing that has to become is a bit like safeguarding. So when I joined the NHS nearly 30 years ago, safeguarding was just becoming like a mandatory thing. It was becoming a thing that everyone had to get involved in and know a bit about. Before that, it wasn't, right? And in some European countries, I work with some organisations where one of their main challenges is that safeguarding is not part of the infrastructure. So I think this work we're doing will become a bit like safeguarding, that if you do a certain job, you have to know about it. If you do a certain job, you will know how to assess some of the trauma. If you do a certain job, you'll know how to be able to support and contain someone's emotional situation. If you do another job, you'll be able to de-escalate someone and help them feel safe. So I think bit by bit, all of those things will start to become part of the fabric of organisations and part of just normal practice eventually.
And it's there in the principles, isn't it? And when we reconfirmed our commitment to this
with the senior leadership exec
of the partnership, we asked 5 things for them to commit to. And we asked for them to commit that every organisation across West Yorkshire is trauma-informed and responsive. So you're right, Caroline, there is an ask there of private industry. And there are some brilliant examples of private industry doing this. Timpson's, for example, is one of them. So I think we've got examples out there we can build on to use. The work we've been doing with the Violence Reduction Unit around the nighttime economy, having a safe, healthy, thriving nighttime economy, that brings in a whole different case of private industry, and they're on board and they're engaged in that. So I think the mechanisms are there, and at some point in this journey we'll be utilising them. So all organisations be trauma informed, all staff to have access to restorative supervision and health and wellbeing services. Prevention and early intervention has got to be something that we're all talking about and embedded in the work, and that parity of esteem. Then we talked about the movement itself and keeping it going, keeping people joining the movement, because this isn't, the West Yorkshire journey is not just a bunch of people sat behind a desk back in an office. It is 500 or more people. It is everybody watching this today and that was involved yesterday. It's their journey. We're providing a means of facilitating that, but it is their journey. And so the more people we get on board, the stronger it becomes. And there's a fifth one, Warren, and I can't remember what it was.
Well, I think the fifth one was helping places
to
develop their ATR initiatives and programmes.
Yes.
But you did brilliantly remember all those, actually. One of the things that I think is going to help us sustain this change over time is, and it applies to private industry as well, avoiding burnout, protecting the workers from vicarious trauma, and staying healthy. And I think that I know a lot of people in West Yorkshire now after working with you for a while. I also see people in other parts of the country, and I see lots of dedicated people who are very passionate, who are working really hard, who've got this collective vision, and they're really excited about it. But I also recognise that people under huge amounts of pressure, facing huge amounts of burden, are all working harder, because the more vacancies there are in the system, the more people go off sick, more people are under pressure. And after COVID, everyone's tired a bit, people have been through a lot. And that, like I said when I did my talk on day one, I really do think one of our challenges, one of our disciplines is going to have to be about how we look after ourselves and how we take rest. And seeing rest and supervision and those restorative things not as a luxury or a sign that you can't cut it, or you're part of a leadership culture where everyone works hard and works stupid hours and all that. I've been there. It's not healthy. And you're not being a role model when you're doing that either. I was terrible. I was the worst role, and I still am probably, actually, to be quite honest. But I am working on it. And what I recognise is, the reason I got burnt out in 2016 was because I thought I could just carry on and keep doing it. So I think one of the challenges to sustaining this to 2030, because it is a long term, we've got another 7 years to go, haven't we? If that's right, if my maths are right, is each of us being kind to ourselves and giving ourselves appropriate time to recuperate and restore and to come back feeling refreshed.
And maybe that will improve our workforce.
Well, the evidence suggests that it does.
There's so many vacancies and people probably feel safer.
Well, people go off sick, they keep working, they go off sick, and then everyone back at work has to do more because they've gone off sick. If they took proper rest in the first place, and I feel hypocritical saying this, because driving up I was thinking I really need to take some time off. So I'm not saying it's easy, I'm not saying I've got it cracked, because I certainly haven't. But I observe how hard everyone's working. And I think if people take good rest and get looked after in that form of reflection, that's going to help us. It's going to help us.
And one of the things that you said in the fifth one that I missed out, which is really, really bad, around places, because this wouldn't be happening either without the leadership that's happening in each of our places. Every Leeds, Bradford, Colesdale, Kirklees, Wakefield, they're all on their own journey as well, linking with us. And Rob, you've been on that journey for a long time with Bradford.
West Yorkshire even. But Can I just add something to what you're saying, which is will probably be more radical, because I read economics as well. And I read someone called Mariana. I can't pronounce the second name, but she's professor of economics at UCL, and she's written a series of books about a mission-focused society. And she talks about the Apollo program as a case study, and the way they got to the moon was they freed NASA from all the ticking the boxes. They simply, in effect, said, this is the mission. We want to land on the moon by 1970.
Right.
Go do it. You've got the skills, make it happen. And you'll make mistakes. You'll waste money. Forget about that. And they spent a fortune on it. But they did something that, human imagination, it was a dream, and they made it happen. And she talks very eloquently about the fact we need to go back to mission processes. You need to be freed. There's my observation after nearly 25 years of watching this. What happens is you're constantly trying and you're constantly measuring initiatives, because initiatives give you scores. Scores give you validity within a system that's measuring you. And actually what you need to be measured is that you are free to use all that education, all that passion, all that experience, and drive the mission to the place it needs to be. If you know the stats in West Yorkshire, if you know what those are, this can't continue as a healthy society if we continue to allow a substantial part of our population to live in that adversity and to perpetuate it.
And I think to a degree we have got some of that freedom. I think that's why this programme's working so well, because we have been given some of that freedom. And as I said earlier, you know, really privileged to work in a partnership where they value public health, they value inequalities and reducing inequalities and everything that goes with that. You know, the fellowship programme that we've got, you know, but I think our barrier is, and the reason why I think there's still maybe half a shackle on us, is because we don't have that parity of esteem yet between prevention and intervention. And that's what's holding us back, because we do need to invest in some of our services in a different way for this truly to meet its ambition. But I do think we have been given that permission in West Yorkshire to do our very best to get there.
I mean, I'm an outsider, so I'm not in this. I'm in the kind of outside the system in some ways, because I choose to be there, you know, because there's a reason for that. So I can give you an honest reflection. I think you've done enough. To the people in charge of the system, I don't see this anywhere else, even in Scotland particularly. I think you've done enough, and what you're demonstrating is what will drive whatever language you want to use. I call it evolution. An evolution of a health system that begins to see really why people are ill, why they are dysfunctional, and why they create so many issues, mostly for themselves. Because you'll tell them, if you do it right, that you are allowed to matter to yourself. Because most of what happens with people who are traumatized is they're not abusing other people, they're abusing themselves in some form or another. And we need to stop that, because we're all losers. I think you need to be free. I know it's very difficult for systems that have been trapped in paradigms and methodologies and all the rest of the language we use. You know, but if you do that, I think you can go to the moon. I think you can do the Apollo mission for human beings.
And I think, can I just add to that, Bob? I think I totally agree. And I think 5 years ago, we wouldn't be sat here doing this. We wouldn't have this programme with all these people joined up in their thinking. We wouldn't have, it's been an evolution, absolutely. I think it's amazing that now there's so much energy around it. But I think I agree with one of the things that I think will make the difference to getting us there in 2030 is that permission. So when you get in a big organisation, what you see is, and I interact with various big organisations, you see that they've got so many policies and procedures and traditions and expectations and culture. And often it's very, very complex. And the thing that's very hard is to get somebody's vision, passion, inspiration, idea realised, because you have to go through all those different layers of bureaucracy and governance. So I think the thing, I always think about Rhode Island's prison system when they introduced trauma-informed principles and reduced levels of violence dramatically. And the thing that struck me about that was, they gave everybody a rationale for why they were doing it, prisoners and staff. They gave people knowledge, they gave them some training, some knowledge and insight. And then they gave them permission and went, you're the experts on what happens day to day, find solutions. So I think once we can get to a point where people on the front line, people in management roles are starting to feel that little bit more agency, that bit more permission, because they're the experts, right? That's when I think we'll start seeing those.
But that's in itself a journey, isn't it?
Completely.
And I think what we were talking about is at the point where we need it, at that leadership point at the minute, we've got that permission. And I don't think many other places probably do have that. And what we need to do now is be able to mirror that at the different layers in the system, so that everybody feels they've got that ownership and that permission. And that's the journey.
That's the journey.
Yeah.
And I think often those managers sandwich between the front line and the very senior leaders, those people in the middle have huge amounts of responsibility to look after their staff, but also to respond to the powers that be. And often they're the ones that actually, maybe, I wouldn't say again neglected, but maybe don't have as much support and as much, and noticed quite as much as those other
I think language-wise, thinking of what Lisa was saying about the use of language, I do prefer freedom to permission, because permission still holds an element of power to it, whereas what we want people to be is free to act in a trauma-informed way.
You need to be trusted.
Yes.
So as the engineers who built Saturn V rockets, and that was a journey because that was bespokely built. They can't replicate it because they don't have the blueprints, because they built it by hand. It wasn't manufactured. It was built. It was built by hand. You need to be allowed to do that. That's the only way.
I think we're saying the same thing.
saying the same things. I think you're right. Permission does imply some sort of power. I personally feel, I worked with a big organisation recently, and some of the things that staff said to me was, we have this knowledge, we kind of have this passion, we know this agenda. What we maybe don't have so much of is empowerment and trust. So if we felt more empowered and more trusted, we would realise those ideas because we know what's going on. So I think we're saying it in different ways.
Unpicking the ingredients of freedom.
Right, empowered, to be given power. To be given power.
And truly be responsible.
Well, it's a shared power, isn't it?
You shared, not higher. I mean, the problem with systems is, we're seeing it. Another institution at this moment is collapsing upon itself, probably into a hole that people may not find a way out of. But but you really need to have responsibility. But you need to have flatter structures, because you need to be able to create in real time. And that's a real revolution, the systems that have contained themselves, because that's how you do the prison work. That's how you do the work with county lines.
And we saw it in COVID, didn't we? We saw it in COVID. Organisations ripped the book up in COVID and went, right, you guys find a way.
We've just got to get on with it.
And amazing things happened.
There's your mission. Get it done.
Look at the vaccines.
Make mistakes.
Absolutely. There's so much learning, isn't there, from COVID, as well as the legacy. I know it's not a legacy yet. I don't feel like we're not in a pandemic.
No, we're still rippling.
But the learning in respect to how we got the freedom, how we did the mission, is something we need to hone in and we need to build on within this journey.
And we became very focused on and conscious of the need for people not to be isolated, the need for people to feel connected, and the need for people to feel supported and appreciated.
And then the West Yorkshire journey started in the middle of the first lockdown. That's when this programme begun. So it kind of, I've always said it felt like the craziest time to do something, but it was the right time to do it.
I think there's something else that just comes to mind is, you matter as well. Not because you're paid, it's because you're human beings who bring you to the mix.
Absolutely.
And you matter, and you hopefully are further in, because you matter to yourself. And it's mattering to yourself that gives you the freedom to share with another human being to help them to matter to themselves. And that is most powerful, that needs to be released. That needs to be released, and it needs to be soon, I think.
And that's really important, because some of the time when I'm out there talking to partners and colleagues across the system, they see this as a thing. It's a new service, it's a new therapy, it's a new intervention, but it's none of those things. It's the glasses, it's the lens, it's about people. Human beings.
I didn't get to hear, and because I did it on my own. There were people at moments in time who were anchors in allowing me to be human. And those people are actually, some of them work in your system. They work for, not in part of the system. And they didn't do it because they understood what they were doing. They did it because they mattered to themselves and I mattered to them. And, they did it on different levels in different forms. And without that, I wouldn't be here. So survivors of all trauma need you. You need them, because we can't keep leaving them floating down some river that ends in a waterfall often for many of them. We saw some of that on Twitter last night. But we really, really need to kind of remember that we can't do it without each other. That resolution of all of this Bloom talked
And that
about
collective
it. It
resilience.
needs us all. We're all part of a living system.
Yeah.
An ecology of humanness, a human society. And without that, we're just going to end up in a worse place, which is what Dr. Bloom, I think, very eloquently warned us about. You know, this doesn't end well for us if we repeat history anymore, and if we don't get ahead on greenhouse effect, we don't get ahead on social stuff. Putin next time might be somebody who really will press the button.
Yes.
We, you know, end the story for all of us. We need to do it now and not wait. We need to move forward.
Yeah, and that comes back to what Lisa was and you were saying earlier, Warren, about individualising things, and that's one of the big messages through the programme in West Yorkshire, that this isn't just about individual people. This is about communities, and the different needs of those communities. Yeah. And we have a lot of communities in West Yorkshire that feel trauma. Historical trauma, present trauma, and if we don't have that collective resilience and we don't use the assets that we have in our communities, we're never going to make that movement, that change. Because at the moment, yes, we've got people, and I know there's people don't necessarily like the term lived experience, but apologies, that's what I'm going to have to use today. But we've got people on this journey with lived experience. We've all got lived experience. I mean, it does make me laugh, actually. We're all alive. We're all experiencing things. So
We're living experience.
Yeah, we are all living experience.
Yeah.
But we've got people that have been through a journey and that are supporting us now with our journey, but not enough. Not enough yet. One of the things we need across West Yorkshire is our communities to rally behind this as well. And to do that, we have to give them some knowledge.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think Tiny's back to, you know, coming full circle is when we look at therapeutic work, whatever that is, whether it's CBT or psychotherapy or mentoring or recovery for people with drug and alcohol problems or recovery from sexual abuse, whatever it is, all these things we call psychosocial interventions, they've all got one thing in common, and that is that they work better if the relationship's good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When you look at all the studies, the meta-analysis of the last 50 years, the quality of the relationship and connection with that other person is the best predictor of someone getting better.
Yeah.
And the other frightening fact is, those studies also tell us something else. If people say their relationship with the person that they're interacting with was unsatisfactory, those people get worse.
Yeah.
So people can be harmed by therapeutic support if the relationship doesn't come first.
Yeah.
So the implication of that being, if we are not all prioritising the quality of our relationships and our well-being, the healing ain't going to happen.
Absolutely right. Yeah, that's. Well, we've got one last question. So, last question of the day: how do we get this message beyond West Yorkshire?
I mean, the message is already beyond West Yorkshire. The message, predominantly at the minute through England anyway, is coming through the violence reduction units. It's coming through the violence prevention part of the system, because people have realised that it's trauma and the root causes that's causing the violence.
Yeah.
And if we want to prevent violence, we have to reduce trauma in the system. So it's out there. The message is out there. It's broader than West Yorkshire already, and we're linking in. West Yorkshire's linking in very closely with other partnerships in the north of England to look at how we can collectively create a movement to have some kind of consistent vision, policy strategy for the north of England, if nothing else.
Yeah.
You know, we've got the Child of the North report, which is pretty damning, really, isn't it, if you think about it, around the potential that young people don't have in the north of England. And we want to change that. And so I think we keep doing what we're doing, and we keep reaching out. We share our practice far and wide, and we learn from other areas as well. So I think if we can keep those relationships going that we've already built and build on them, well, relationships again, then the word will just spread.
We did that event for the people in New Zealand, didn't we? In
we
Bay
did.
Plenty, and that was fascinating because they're going on the journey that we started on in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
But they have a very different framework for making sense of this whole thing we call trauma and trauma informed. And their Maori perspective on trauma is that it's a legacy issue. It's a consequence of colonisation. So the pain and distress and drug problems and alcohol problems and mental health problems and social difficulties that they're struggling with, they see as a direct consequence of colonisation. So they see it as an intergenerational, as a collective experience.
Right.
And we shed our perspective on it as well. So we're exchanging ideas and knowledge with other parts of the world, and I think New Zealand's just one example. We've got, you know, we get invited to talk to other people as well.
Well, Dr. Sandra Bloom.
Of course.
And last year we had Dr. Alicia Molan-Kapua,
Yes.
who also presented for us. So we've got contacts, you know, internationally as well as nationally.
Yep.
And I'm presenting with colleagues from across the UK next week, chairing a national conference around how systems can work to be more trauma informed. So I think now is the time. If we don't get this right now, it's never going to happen, because there is more conversations, more projects, more.
Yeah. And I do this global meeting with a colleague from America every quarter.
Yeah.
Came and presented at that recently. So there were people from like 14 different countries on this meet. People getting up in the middle of the night, you know, the sun was coming up in some of those countries, and there's them talking about what's happening in West Yorkshire. So we've got all of that exchange going on as well. Wherever I go, they always ask me, you know, is there any great examples of where the whole system's bought into it? And inevitably, whether I'm in Brussels, Bolton or Blackburn, I end up talking about what's happening in West Yorkshire. I go to all the glamorous places, you know.
I think one thing I do really want to say though, that we're not trauma informed right now. And that's not what we're claiming on this journey in West Yorkshire. What we're claiming is this is where we want to be. We can see the reward that lies ahead if we get this right.
Absolutely.
And the benefits to everybody that lives and works in West Yorkshire. But we have to do it together. It has to be everybody's business. So,
absolutely.
So I'll go back to my Star Trek presentation just for a second. And in one of those scenes, the ship enters a space that's been made safe where everybody is working together for a mission.
Yeah.
I think you need to you're ready to fly. I think you're ready to open the doors and to tell the world what you're doing. And I think you need more of these conversations and more voices having a chat about it. And you need to put it out there rather than keep it inside. You need to put it out there. You need to be kind of careful what you do with it, but you need to put it out there. You need to open the doors and let the light in, and you need to start taking it into the community itself. So I like tools like Trauma, Wisdom of Trauma. I like that story because it opens up a conversation of people, and we shouldn't be scared because it's opening up anyway.
And actually Bradford are about to embark on that journey.
That's
and
really
we're
good.
Supporting them as a system partnership. So Bradford have commissioned or are about to commission a piece of work that will be done directly in the community.
Be good.
And we're supporting that and we're going to share the learning from that and hopefully scale up the activity across the system. And Lisa and I were talking about, I know it sounds a bit twee, but learn to listen, listen to love. How do we just go out and start conversations with people? So we're not asking people to share their trauma. We don't want to do that because people might not be ready. People might not want to. We just want to start conversations. I don't know if we do that anymore as a society.
I know I do. I think we do absolutely need to talk about it with people in our social circle and our sphere of influence. I also think if someone's seeking help from us and we're doing an assessment, we should be asking them about trauma and not shying away from it. So there's a time and a place. And also public health messaging. You know, like 50 years ago, we didn't think smoking was particularly bad for us. You know. Like, even though we had studies, we were still promoted and advertised on TV and in shops. And whereas today, we don't even let kids see images of it, you know? So that public health messaging as well.
This is a public health message. This is a huge, one of the most important public health messages of today, of the times.
And I think the most important one will be is it's okay for you to acknowledge your trauma, because that doesn't mean that you are somehow lost in some form of limitation. And I think that's why people stay quiet, and that's why the stigma exists. Because in effect, it's fed by the fear that if I acknowledge my own, then somehow I will be less, and I've coped and managed with it. And we need to end that, because we need to end it, because that frees us all. So if you go to Maori culture, you go to North American culture, you go to any indigenous culture, they resolve trauma, they resolve these issues, not by experts, but by everybody.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry, we do have to end there. Thank you so much, that's been an amazing conversation, and I hope everybody's enjoyed that and all the other sessions that we've had. Thank you.
Thank you.